Hi everyone, this is Matthew Janda for CardRunners, and I'm here with Button and Blind Play Part 5, playing our entire range on the button when facing a check. And in this video, I'm actually going to write out what I would do with every single hand in our range. So let's go over a quick outline for the video. We're first going to quickly go over the 4 hand types I typically check back on the button. We'll later see if I'm coming close to checking the right amount of each. So it's not that helpful if I just put down like, oh, I bet these hands and I check these hands. We want to make sure we have the right types of hands in our checking range, the right types of hands in our betting range, that it seems reasonably balanced. So I want to go over the 4 types of hands I usually check back so we can later see if it looks like we're checking the right amount of each. And then I want to randomly generate a flop or 2 and write out what to do with our entire range. So let's visualize the 4 hand types. So here are the 4 hand types I'm usually checking back. The first are some nut type hands, likely with removal effects. So it's just hard to value bet like pocket kings on a king 7-2 rainbow flop. Also, it may be nice to be able to raise some turn cards or comfortably call large bets, and that's easier to do if we check back some really strong hands on the flop. These types of hands make up a very, very small fraction of our flop checking range, and sometimes I don't check back any really strong hands. So this one's probably the easiest one. Just be aware. Sometimes I will check back some really strong hands, especially if they have a strong removal effect, but that only makes up a super small fraction of our flop checking range. The second type of hand would be strong hands not afraid of giving a free card and which kinda like facing bets from the opponent on later streets. So if the flop comes king 7-3, king 2 would be a really good example of that. I'm not afraid of giving free cards with this. I don't want to get check raised, and it gives me something to value bet later. So, betting king 2 on this flop is clearly profitable. You probably can bet any 2 cards on this flop profitably. But it's probably better to check king 2, and by checking it, we're going to be able to call bets comfortably on the turn in the river with this hand, and also it will let us bet with a balanced range on later streets since we can bet king 2 for value and put in some bluffs. So next would be hands with showdown value which don't retain their equity as bets and dislike facing bets from the opponent. So that would be like ace 8 on the king 7-3 board. We're trying to show down this bad boy and win with ace high or just get lucky on the turn and river. So I would usually check ace 8 on the king 7-3, hoping my opponent lets me check it down and win with my ace high hand, or I would just hope that I get lucky and I turn an ace or an 8, and notice by checking ace 8 on the king 7-3 board, we're likely in good shape if we turn an ace or an 8, because by checking with ace 8, we keep our opponent's, we keep like ace 2, ace 4, ace 5 in our opponent's range, so we can outkick our opponent if we turn an ace. And likewise, if we turn an 8, we keep very weak hands like 8 jack in our opponent's range, which will outkick the opponent if he has jack 8 and we have ace 8 on the 8 turn. So I would check ace 8, and I would check, a good amount of like ace high hands here or like weaker pairs. And exactly which weak pairs to check on this board isn't that easy, and we'll talk about that later, and we've already talked about it a bit in the previous videos. Alright, so the fourth one is just some pure air. This one I've been especially bad at doing in the past. So I think a good example would be like if the board comes king of hearts, 7 of hearts, 3 of clubs, just check back 10, 6 of spades. Ask yourself, what is the most effective way to play a hand with 0% equity? In other words, when would you prefer to bet a 15% robust equity hand compared to a 0% equity hand? So now let me show you exactly what I mean by that. You want to bet the hand with robust equity on the flop since it can make the nuts on a good turn in river. So if you have a hand like 8-6 of clubs on this flop, you for sure want to bet it. We've talked a lot in the past about how 3 to a flush and 3 to a straight can make some very strong hands and it's easy to barrel. So if you have 8-6 of clubs, definitely bet it here on the flop. But with a hand like 10-6 of spades, this hand's really hard to improve. We can turn some gut shots, but it's very hard to run a runner a straight. We can't run a runner a flush. There's not that many great pairs we can turn a river, because even if we turn like a 10, we're often going to be outkicked by other 10s. So if we have a hand like 10-6 of spades, to me, this seems like a hand that we should bluff later rather than on the flop. Let's bluff our good hands on the flop that can make some really strong hands. Whereas if we have a really crappy hand, let's sort of just check it back on the flop. That way, if our opponent bets the turn, we can just muck it and we don't feel bad about it, right? Like if we check back 10-6 of spades here, and then the turn card comes to 2 and our opponent bets, we're going to have to fold some hands. Well, we'd of course like to fold just the absolute worst hands because we don't feel bad about folding them. So we can check back 10 of 6 of spades on the flop, intending to fold it to our opponent's turn bet. And then if he doesn't end up betting, we can bluff it later, like on the river, where our hand quality won't matter.